August is Women's Month, and we at the station are showcasing powerful and resilient women. These are people who have gone through incredible trauma or change in their life, and they have come back better and stronger. This is Beautiful Night. Get Me to 21, the story of Jenna Lowe as written by her mom, Gabi Lowe. When I first picked this book up, I won't lie, my heart sank. I thought I can't read 438 pages of grief. Interviewing Gabi as a mom who'd lost her daughter is one of the most profound interviews I've ever done. To read about how somebody could deal with that kind of tragedy and pain with such grace and creativity and love. It's an absolutely uplifting story. I would strongly advise you to buy the book and take a look at this. So Gabi Lowe, when I read about this book, I thought to myself, Jenna's story was so traumatic and so devastating. I don't think I can read through all of that. I don't think I can watch that again, because I remember when she won the Lead Essay Award that March for her work with organ donation.
Yes.
And so I felt that I'd followed her story in a way that her being sick, her promoting organ donation awareness, the illness that she had that I'd never actually heard about, all the things she did, the different appearances she made, and I mean her award for managing to get like one of the 30 best matrics in the Western Cape, even when she'd been so sick. So when she died, I felt cheated in a way, as I'm sure a lot of people did, that she hadn't got to 21, because that was the campaign, Get Me to 21.
Yeah.
So this book ended up on my lap, and my first thought was, oh no. And I was so surprised and so, in a good way, shocked at how it's anything but that. That it's a story, it's not a story of death, it's a story of life.
Exactly.
And I would recommend it to anyone. I think it's an absolutely brilliant read. But what I want to focus on is the person who wrote it. Because as I said, it's Jenna's story, but I'd never thought about it before as a parent. And my daughter's Genevieve, we call her Jenna, so I have my own Jenna. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, I can't imagine losing my child. And I certainly can't imagine being able to write about it in an uplifting and graceful way. So my first question has to be, how did you do that?
Wow, so I only started 3 years after her death. I did want to start earlier, but I was still processing anger and disbelief and trauma. There was a lot of trauma, post-traumatic stress after the 187 days in ICU. But then there came a time that I felt I was ready. I knew that Stu really wanted me to write it, and as you've read the book, you know that he has cancer. So there was a bit of a time pressure, because I don't know what the future holds. And I just felt ready, and I felt that I wanted to do it for Jen, because she was going to write a book when she came out. She told me about it at length. Mm. I wanted to do it for me, to help me to process and integrate the grief. But more than anything, I wanted to do it for everybody else, because we invited everyone onto our journey.
You really
and
did.
As you've just said, you felt like you went through that. So we really did invite everyone onto the journey, and they came wholeheartedly and beautifully on the journey. There was something that felt really important about writing it.
Did you find, because when I wrote From Whiskey to Water about my alcoholism, I thought I'd dealt with things. I really did. When I wrote it, and it was 14 years after I'd got sober, that I wrote the book, and I thought, well, these are all things I'm fine with now.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was writing them, I realized I haven't dealt with this. I've just put it away, because now it's come out of the cupboard, and it's still as messy and dirty and ugly and embarrassing as it was back then. And I had to process it from a more aware perspective, but I hadn't dealt with it. And I wondered if you felt you'd processed, or if as you were writing, you went through it again.
So it's an interesting question. A lot of it I felt I had processed or was working with, but the part about the ICU, I hadn't. And the first time I looked at those journals that I had written, and the first time I looked at Jenna's journals, was when I sat down to write the book. So I wrote that part really near the end, and I was terrified of getting to it, and I went away up the coast to very dear friends have a house in Azefontein, and I stayed alone in the house, and I would be lying if I said to you I wasn't re-traumatized. I was. I vomited, I shook, I cried. But I had the benefit of having for 3 years done a lot of processing, a lot of work with my grief, and a lot of life coaching. So I actually physically would get up from the desk, walk outside, take my shoes off, stand with my feet in the sand, and talk out loud and tell my body, you are not in ICU. You are not back there. We are here, and we're writing the story for Jen. But I think that having gone through that again, and having had to go in there and find those memories in this traumatic mess, and go through them day by day and lay it out, I can promise you that I feel lighter now. I really do. And I think that there was something about doing that that allowed me to let go of something.
For those people who don't know the story of Jenna,
Yes.
like I say, I was there, I read it, I lived it. When she died, I grieved for somebody I had never met and never seen. So, but for those people who don't remember or weren't around at the time, tell us about Jenna.
She was an extraordinary child, and she was right from the start. A very gentle but courageous soul with an extremely sharp intellect and mind, a brilliant mind. But I think the most extraordinary thing about her was that she just appeared to have this wisdom from a very young age. And so that was a gift to me, a real gift. And I learnt a lot from her. She was also just a normal human being who wanted to be a normal teenager, who wanted to go out jawling and wear sexy clothes and be able to dance and, you know, go to matric rage and be normal. I have a sense that she had a very full life. She impacted so many people. She did a lot in her life, and that's amazing. But I also have a sense that there was so much more she had to do. And as Stu says, it's, you know, she could have made a big dent in the universe if she hadn't have died at the age of 20.
Tell me, when you first found out she was sick, how that started.
So that started with a phone call on the beach in Plet from Stuart's younger sister to say that her daughter had been diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer. It was a huge bolt out of the blue for all of us, but shortly after that, my Jane started showing signs of breathlessness. And I describe at length in the book how long it took us to get a diagnosis, because she had this very rare disease, lung condition called pulmonary arterial hypertension, which sounds pretty innocuous, but it's not.
Actually.
You know, it does. It just sounds like high blood pressure, but it's not. It's a very rare degenerative lung condition.
What does it do?
Excessively high pressure in the veins and arteries of the lungs. But why? Because the veins and arteries of the lungs are diseased and they are shutting down. And so the patient cannot absorb the oxygen. You can breathe in, but you never get that sense of relief because you don't absorb the oxygen. So I know you exercise a lot.
Yeah.
So you'll know that even if you run a marathon, when you're breathless, you can pant, 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 pant. Your oxygen levels never drop.
No.
You may need to breathe faster and your heart works faster to get the oxygen around your body fast enough, but your oxygen levels never drop. Never. Jenna's oxygen levels dropped as she walked. So she lived with far less oxygen than any one of us ever does, well, because this stays the same. And that got worse as her disease got worse, which in a way makes it even more extraordinary that she was one of the top 30 students in the country, because she wrote her matric on an oxygen machine that size that she affectionately called Thunder because it made such a damn noise.
The way the two of you worked, it was like watching a duck, but you were the feet. So she sailed through
Yes.
doing these incredible interviews and being so passionate about organ donation and being so graceful and positive. But you made that possible by being there with medication, supporting her, and not just emotionally. I mean, physically, this was a team effort.
100%. She couldn't dress herself. She couldn't wash her own hair. She couldn't pick up a laptop. She couldn't carry a case. So those are all things people don't think about, because when they saw her, she presented so beautifully and so immaculately and that is how she was. But I became her body, actually, her arms, her legs, It became for her really hard to have to call me all the time, because number one, she was too breathless, but number two, she felt it was tough to have to rely on me. And so for her, there was a bit of shame involved in having to call me all the time. So her and I talked about that, and so we developed a system where we had a very beautiful, she helped me buy a crystal bell, and she would just ring the crystal bell every time she needed me, and then she didn't have to ask. It was strange. We kind of developed our own language. But it got to the point where I could hear from her oxygen machine and the noise that it made, every nuance of every breath I could hear, no matter where I was in the house. And if that changed slightly, I was in her room. So we became like one person, actually. We became like one person.
You love, you look after, but you're not the kind of woman who can just blindly trust. Gone are the days where whatever the doctor says is what happens. And because it was so rare, that was a whole new fight for you.
That was.
Talk about that.
That was a whole new fight. And what was really tough was in the beginning, South African doctors were not that keen to speak the language of collaboration, you know. So we really had to teach them that I wasn't going to accept that we were going to find the best expertise in the world. And that didn't mean that they didn't matter. That meant they mattered enormously. But we were going to be a team. And that's how it works. From egos and agendas and political agendas to logistics like pharmaceutical companies and medical control council and parliament and how to get the medication, to money, we don't have it, now I can't work, so I need to fundraise, then to the international doctors, and just getting everybody, I managed that, getting everybody to speak the same language.
And with that, she was able to do things.
She was able to do things.
I mean, one of the most moving pictures in the book, for me, is not a picture of Jenna. It's a picture of you getting together the medication that she needed in order to go on holiday. Because she couldn't go on holiday.
No.
She couldn't leave the house, really.
By then she was on full-time oxygen.
Yeah.
So, you know, you just say full-time oxygen. Well, oh, cool, so what, you just carry around no, it's not that easy. When you're at home, there's one machine. If you're now leaving, you need an oxygen concentrator that makes oxygen, because now you're not plugged in. So then we would need, but then you only get one that's 3 liters a minute, but she was then on 8 liters a minute. So then you need a cylinder in the car. She was on a mobility scooter that needs to be charged, and all the batteries always need to be up to date, and you need second batteries. So it was a military precision sort of project just to leave the house. Then she was on this medication Flowline, which was an IV ibuprofen, which I mixed every morning. It was 24 hours a day, a pump that went directly into her right heart chamber. And it needed to be kept cold. So you would have to take ice packs with you wherever you went, because those needed to be changed every 6 hours. And we live in South Africa. It's a warm country. And then she was on oral medication. Then there was lots of meds that food that she couldn't eat or drink, because when you're on blood thinners, there's a lot that you eat that will change the level, your INR levels. It plays with your INR level.
There were setbacks, because we're talking about the big things that you fought: the Medicines Control Council, going to Parliament, getting the drugs into the country. And that you're ready for. Those are battles that you're kind of not necessarily expecting, but
you steeled for them in a way, right?
But when someone's mean to her in a shop, you're not prepared for that.
No.
And yet she was.
So there are many stories like that, and I think I only told about one of them in the book. People would stare. They would stare at her. And poor Christy, she just used to go into protection mode, and she would be like, I'll take you on. And Jen used to say, Christy, smile and wave, smile and wave. And this one day we went shopping, the two of us. She wanted to go to Cavendish Square, she wanted to go shopping. And off we go, and she's scooting along on her scooter. We've got all the oxygen machines and the pumps and the what, and people staring. And she just smile at them and disarm them mostly. And what I love is that we went past La Senza. I do love this. It's just a quirky little thing. And the lady came rushing out. She was, Jen!
Oh, she really
we came rushing back, and she had kept for her, because Jen used to love underwear, beautiful underwear. And she hadn't seen her for months because Jen hadn't left the house. And she'd kept for her, in her size, one of all the latest ranges, just in case she can. I mean, that was just beautiful. Anyway, we ended up going to Woolworths, because even in her sick state, Jen said, there's no goal or heel too high.
I love it.
So we went and we were looking at shoes. Wow. So we're sitting there, we're trying on shoes, and I'm bringing them to her, and we're trying all of these. And I noticed this lady sitting over there, and she kept like looking and staring and looking and staring. And then at one point, I was busy with something, and Jen stood up off her mobility scooter and went to get a shoe off the shelf. And this woman, her jaw just dropped, and she looked at her and she said, "Well, if you don't need to be on that thing, like, what are you doing on that mobility scooter?" Literally. I was absolutely gobsmacked. First of all, at the stupidity. Like, what? What did she think? That she's doing it for attention? That you have to be, like, not able to walk in order to be on a mobility scooter? I mean, I don't know, just the complete stupidity. And Jen could see my body reaction, and she went, "Mom, smile and wave."
Organ donation.
Yeah.
When did you decide, and I say you, I mean the two of you, because
Yes.
as you say, you were one unit. When did you decide that she wasn't just going to get better? She was going to share her story, and she was going to raise awareness. Because this child could not raise a laptop,
I know.
but she was out there campaigning.
Yes, she was.
So
And she was passionate about it.
She really was.
And no matter how sick she was, if she knew she had an interview that day, she would not go to school. She would sleep all morning so she could go to the interview. Because it became very clear when she first started campaigning for awareness around pulmonary hypertension that it was changing the lives of other patients. So she knew that when she eventually got emergency listed for transplant, and then it slowly dawned on us that the chances of her getting an organ were really slim because the situation's so dire.
And she didn't just need one organ, she needed two.
She needed two. She couldn't have one.
No.
No. It's very clear when I tell the story of how the Get Me to 21 campaign came around. The agency, who was going to now help us with it, arrived to shoot with a script. Jen just tore it up. She was
It
like,
wasn't her, it wasn't you.
no. So she didn't follow the script. She just said, no, it's all fine. You can just shoot. Just shoot. And she's in her bed. We've changed the pump. She's on her oxygen. And she literally just spoke into the camera. And she just invited the whole of South Africa to her 21st birthday. That's it. And said, all you have to do to come is become an organ donor. And she literally just spoke from the heart. And we didn't know. I mean, we hoped it would have an impact, but we had no idea. There's a mission, and she made that clear. Because if I don't get lungs, I'm not going to get to my 21st birthday. And I'd like to be there with you. So that campaign went viral, which you know, and single-handedly changed the organ donation rate by 287%.
Unreal. And when I saw that, I registered as an organ donor straight away. And then she got lucky.
She got lucky. She got lucky. So by then, she'd been very sick for a long time, and she was now staying at home, and she'd waited for 7 months. And on the 10th of December 2014, we got the call to say, we've got lungs. Amazingly, I was not in Cape Town. And I had not left Jenna's side in 365 days, literally, since she'd had the port put in and gone onto that medication. But Christy had given up and foregone so much in her life, which is what happens to the sibling of a sick child. And her boyfriend at the time that she was madly in love with was going to matric grade. It wasn't Christy's matric grade, she was a year younger. But she really wanted to go. And Stuart and I talked about it at length and eventually decided, how could I not let her? But I couldn't let her go on her own, she was too young.
Sure, absolutely.
So we agreed that she could go, but only if I was there. I would stay 3 houses down the road from her and be there.
So long as you were there.
As long as I was there. But it meant leaving Cape Town. Jen was like, you have to go. You can't not let Christy do this. And, you know, the chances were nothing was going to happen while I was away. Nurse Lizzie was in Cape Town, so she would help with the mixing. So we had everything set up. And, of course, that's when the call came. That's when the call came. And that day is where I start the book, and it's a dramatic day of note, and all sorts of things happen. And if that's not a scene in a movie, I don't know. I mean, it's insane.
Well, here's the thing, because that's where, if this was a movie, the story would end. She'd get the lung transplant, and everything would be fine. She'd have done all this awareness creation, and she would have done. And the fact that she looked like an angel, you know, and the power of the campaign and the amount of time and love and energy and intellect you both put into it. That should end with her coming around.
Yeah, we should have had our happy ending.
There you go. She should be sitting here now, and this book shouldn't be on my lap.
Well, her book should be on your lap, because she was going to write her book.
So talk to me about
Hospital.
187 days.
Her transplant was 8 hours. When the doctor came out, the surgeon came out, he said it's one of the most difficult transplants he's ever done. But she was a fighter. So I don't know what that meant. If I read between the lines, maybe they nearly lost her in surgery. I don't know. They didn't know if she would make those first few days.
Okay.
And they made that pretty clear to me. They didn't know my child. I'm not lying when I say I didn't leave her side. Stuart and I had now moved to Joburg in one day. I was with her all day and he was with her all night, basically, for all of the time. She nearly didn't survive the first week, but she sort of started getting better. She really fought. At one stage we sent, she was doing so badly, and she wasn't conscious, and we sent Christy in there, and Christy stood at her side and sung to her sister for 6 hours. Yeah, and her heart rate, we watched her heart rate on the monitor just come down and settle like that. It was amazing. Her lungs, and here's the weird part, yes, there were many times in those 6 months where we had to have a pleural tap, where they filled up with fluid, where things went wrong, but at the end of her day, her lungs were great. They were a good match. But everything else went wrong. She started to have seizures. She got appendicitis. Her kidneys failed. All her organs failed. She got an overdose from a nurse.
And you were there every day?
Yeah.
So you were there for all of it?
Watching, holding. All of it. All of it. All of the procedures. When she had lumbar punctures, I held her. I sat with her. When she had pleural taps, I held her. Yeah.
Because you were still one person.
Yeah, we were. There was no light. There was no clock. We developed these things where I put a clock on the wall so she could know if it was daytime or nighttime, because she didn't know. She had such hectic medication, and for her, the hardest thing, I mean, this tells you who Jen is. One of the hardest things was that she used to say to me, "Mum, they've given me so much medication that I forget the nurses' names, and I feel shameful." That worried her so much. So I developed a system of writing that day the nurse's name and hello and thank you in her language on the door, so that she couldn't get it wrong, because that just mortified her. I had a chart. I made a chart. I wrote every day what we'd done that day, what we were going through. We wrote charts on the wall, her goals, as simple as going to the toilet was a goal, walking, washing her hair.
And you kept doing all of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been very careful in the book too. I have given all the details, but I have not used, I don't know if you noticed, not one single adjective in those 6 months.
Didn't need any.
Because it didn't need any. I haven't dramatized it at all. I've just said what happened. And the weird thing was, when I was writing it, I had to go back, and I don't know if you noticed that, back into the present tense.
I did notice that. I was going to
Did you notice that?
Yeah.
And you know why?
You were in it.
Yeah, but also because every day at the time, I had hope. But when I sat down to write it, she was gone. So I had to go back into the present tense, because otherwise I couldn't write it with hope. So that's why I couldn't write it with the hope that we had if I didn't pretend I was back on that day. So that's why it goes back into the present tense.
When you knew she wasn't coming home,
Yeah.
how did you come to terms with that?
Well, I don't know that I did. I mean, I always thought she would make it, right up until the last 2 weeks. I believed that she would make it. And so did she. She fought so much, and she came back from so much, that every time the doctors thought she wouldn't come back, and she did. And 2 weeks before she died, I said to Dr. Williams, do we need to be having a different conversation?
That's brave.
do we need to be having a different conversation? And he said, no, she's fighting, we fight.
Wow.
And she did, till the last minute. Once she actually passed away, I mean, I couldn't believe it. It just seemed surreal.
So then you went home. How did you get up every day?
In the beginning, I don't think I did get up every day, to be very honest. But I had Stu, I had Christy, I was surrounded by amazing people, and I had Jen. And I know that sounds weird, but I don't feel like she's ever completely left me. I still have a relationship with my daughter. Jen was an atheist. She didn't believe in life after death. And she said to me, if there is life after death, because obviously we had to talk about her potential death, I will send you signs. And the day after her memorial, I could not leave my bed. I was broken. And my family were here from Australia, and everyone just kept coming through the room trying to get me to get up. They wanted to take me to the beach, just get me out of the house. And at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard Taylor, my niece, Jenna's cousin, shouting, Gabi, Gabi, you've got to come and look outside. And this eagle, beautiful, big bird, had landed in the tree at the bottom of my garden, and it was sitting at the top of the tree, and it was staring in my bedroom window like this. I promise you, staring in my bedroom window. And I got up and I walked out and I looked at this bird, and it was just looking at me. And it stayed there, and it stayed there, and it stayed there. And I remembered that white dove that I tell you about in the story. The one day she came out of the hospital. She came out for one day, and a white dove came and sat in the tree. And yeah, I said, okay, Jane, I will get up. And ever since then, I feel that she comes to me, and it's always either raptors or white feathers, and they follow me. And when I wrote the book, every time I sat down to write, I lit a candle with a picture of her on the candle and sort of invited her into the space. And then before I started writing, I would walk outside and there would be my white feather. And I didn't start writing till I had my white feather. Do you want to borrow my tissue?
I do actually. Thank you. Want to borrow your tissue. As I sit here. First time I've heard myself cry. Thank you.
Oh dear.
But as I said at the beginning, this book doesn't leave me feeling heavy. And it's funny, it's 438 pages. You do that.
Yeah, it's got some thud factor.
But it's got that factor, exactly. But it never left me feeling as though it weighed on me.
I'm glad.
And I think that has a lot to do, everything to do, with what Gabi did next. Because you got back up, and not only did you get back up, you did so with such grace. And I remember saying to you before we started rolling that I never want to use the word tough about you or about Jenna, that it's strong, because there was always a grace to it. There was always, there still is. I mean, it's here now. And this was not how your life ended, and it hasn't ended up as Jenna's life being lived through you. You're living your own life.
I am.
Every single day. I mean, 6 months after she died, you went and started training to be a life coach.
Yeah.
And often people, because I do the same thing, often people go, oh, well, that's just a piece of paper. And they don't know how much internal ripping apart and tearing you do.
You do a lot of deep internal work to become a life coach. And it was an 18-month international diploma. That's... you do a lot of that work, but it was a lifeline for me, that. It was a lifeline. It helped me to process my grief, to process my stuff. I also went to therapy every single week. I still do. I did something called EMDR. I don't know if you know what that is. For post-traumatic stress disorder. TRE, trauma release exercise. Yoga, walking in nature, meditation daily. I still do it daily. Silent retreats. I mean, I did work hard to help myself to cope.
And tirelessly. I mean, there wasn't a point at which you sat down once and go, well, that's it.
No.
Not once. And you're honest about the fact that it was very tough. As in, it was a tough experience, but it never made you tough or hard.
No, I think that was Jenna's gift to me, was that she taught me how to live with an open heart, actually. Because that's where courage comes from. It's an open-hearted thing. Courage is not a suit of armor,
No.
because a suit of armor can crack and break and rust. Courage is about open-heartedness. It's about all of it. It's about integrating pain and joy, loss and life, death and life, which is about holding paradox. That's what life is, all the time, holding those complexities. And she taught me that.
And now you pass it on.
Hopefully.
Because with life coaching, you provide that conduit.
Yes.
But also you're still out there speaking, you're still talking about how to go on. Over and above the organ donation publicity that you still do, you're out there going, this is how you go on, and you do go on, and you can go on.
And you can go on. You know, I didn't think I would survive her death, but I have. And I am okay. Yeah, I cry when we talk about the tough stuff, of course. The grief is still there. I will carry for the rest of my life the pain of losing my daughter. But I also have a life. I love my life. I love my life. How amazing that I can say that. I love my work. I love life coaching. I do authentic emotional resilience workshops, and I love them, and they are amazing. They're helping so many people. Christy and I have found our way back to each other in the most beautiful way, and I think she's going to be she's going to be an amazing human. Yeah, she is already, but she's going to really blossom.
Because it can fracture a family.
Oh yes, it can.
And yet, even with Stu not being well, I won't say it's brought you closer together, but I think it's highlighted how much love you have for each other.
Yeah,
All
absolutely, absolutely. And we are still very, very close. Yeah.
So if there's somebody listening to this who goes, look at the picture, she looks so together. I mean, even now, you look so well put together. and you don't make it look effortless, but the word you used earlier, seamless. What do you say to somebody who goes, I can't be like her, I'm not like her, I can't do this?
You can. You can. It's about doing your conscious work all of the time, every day. Doing your conscious work, keeping perspective, looking around you and seeing that you're not alone. There are a lot of people in the world who suffer a lot and who go through a lot. No one's handed me this saying, oh, you deserve this. It's not about that. We always have a choice as to how we respond to something. We can't always control what happens around. Good Lord, I tried so hard. You can't, but you can choose how you respond to it. You can always choose how you respond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Playing the best old school and R&B.